What's up, guys? Welcome back to Engine25 Reviews. This is a show where I invite friends, colleagues, academics, other people who are way smarter and more qualified than me, and we talk about movies and TV shows and generally nerd out about stuff we think is cool. If you like that, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and tell your friends. Right now, doing my best to get episodes out at least bi-weekly, usually on Sundays. Not always hitting that mark, but that's the goal. If you ring that bell, you'll never miss one. We're available on video on YouTube and as an audio podcast currently on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public. Just search Engine25 Reviews, no space in Engine25, or hit one of the links in the notes down below. My name is Brandon. I'm your host. You can find me at Engine25 on all the things, sometimes with an underscore. Today we're talking about Avatar: The Way of Water, but before we get there, I want to introduce our guest. Today we have Dr. Dan Singleton, regular guest on the show. He earned a PhD in English with a specialization in film and media studies from the University of Rochester. He's a college professor. He's written in journals, and he's currently writing a book about fan auteurs in contemporary Hollywood movies and TV shows. And I'm not sure I know what that means, but it sounds pretty interesting, so I'll check it out when it's ready. How are you doing today, Dan?
Good. You can read that thing whenever you want because it's my my dissertation, and
Oh, perfect.
it's a fun 299 pages of me talking about recent Hollywood movies and how they're using the fan branding. Like the director will kind of come out, I'm a fan of stuff that just kind of gets worked into the movie and the public face. So that's what I wrote about.
Like when they hire Star Wars fans to make Star Wars movies, and how well that tends to go.
Was first film I write about in after that was kind of it was like starting there and just being like, oh wow, there's actually a lot of across a lot of different kind of doing that same idea, targeted to different fandoms.
Nice.
So yeah, very much like Star Wars is Avatar. I was interested in seeing one because it was never really like exactly kind of stuff I wrote about, but it was kind of like James Cameron is like adjacent to a lot of this stuff. So it was I don't know. I felt like I was back in grad student, bits and pieces of the Avatar experience. I was just thinking all about digital cinema and like these big kind of like James Cameron is like he is the auteur film, and it is very much like a director's movie, for better or for worse, maybe a little bit of both, but anyway, yeah, that's who I am.
Nice. Always happy to have you here. What have you been watching lately before we talk about Avatar? What else have you seen recently?
Oh man, yeah, great question. A lot of my viewing in the last couple of weeks kind of oriented around Avatar. Kind of get pumped for the experience. I did not. Did you rewatch the first Avatar before the sequel?
I did, and viewers, I know his mic's a little noisy, which we did not have in the pre-show, so I'm working on banging that out as we go. But I did, and I've seen it a few times. I'm a stalwart James Cameron fan, and I like the first Avatar. It's definitely very simple, and it's not that original a story. For the first movie in this world, that's probably the safest way to go. As opposed to some big grand story that has like a lot of really nuanced things to say. It's very I would say the same about both Avatar films and even some of James Cameron's other work, is it's not very subtle. It's also, in the case of the Avatar films, not very complex either. And it's because, like, for better or worse, you come here for the experience more so than you come for for more than you come for the script. I guess is where I'm trying to go, but I'll also add that I don't think there's a whole lot of issues with it. It's it's very simple. It's kind of schmaltzy. It gets the job done and gets you from A to B more than anything else. And it's not nearly as nuanced as some of James Cameron's early work, but it doesn't have to. We were just talking in the pre-show, like it's a very simple idea, and the dialogue is like exactly what you'd expect it to be in any situation, kind of. Like there's not a lot of nuance, but it still works anyway. And it's because it's accompanied by visuals that are absolutely astounding. And even beyond that, if it wasn't this fantastic world that we were on, like James Cameron composes and stages all this stuff in absolutely the best way, whether it's fantastical CGI footage or whether it were just filmed on a soundstage in the UK like Aliens was. James Cameron has always had an eye for cinema and for things that look good on the big screen, and for telling you things that you're not hearing in the footage. It's I guess where he always knows where to put the camera, and it's this character's in the foreground for a reason, or the camera's low and it makes this character look tall and heroic, or the camera's low and it makes this character look big and scary. It's the same technique, but it's used effectively in different ways. Just for example, even in this movie, because the Na'vi characters, the aliens in the Avatar movies, for example, are much bigger than humans. They're about twice the size of a human being. So particularly if they're in scenes with humans, they're shot very low and they look big because we're human beings and we're looking up at them. Just for example. But again, Jake Sully, the main character, he's shot at low angles and he looks big and strong and heroic, and he's this great father who's just looking out for his family. And then you have Stephen Lang's character, who, minor spoiler alert, in this movie he is in a Na'vi body, and kind of similar techniques. They put the camera at his waist level, and you're looking up at him most of the time, and he's big and intimidating. And even though it's kind of, it's very simple, but it's always the best way. Like there isn't, and just James Cameron, for all the weaknesses he has with the pen, he always knows where to put the camera, whether the camera was physical or virtual. And it's his big sweeping wides and all the way down to his extreme close-ups. And he's always trying to tell you something. Whether or not the dialogue always works, and it's just this
film leans
go ahead.
on Bro way the Titanic leans on Jack and Rose. Like whenever James Cameron doesn't know what to write, he just writes characters saying the names of these characters.
I'm not going to say you're wrong. It's I don't know where I'm kind of fumbling a little bit, but mostly just to say that I don't think Avatar: The Way of Water or the first Avatar. That's where we started. As I was talking about how I feel about the first Avatar. And I do really like it. I think it's very simple. I don't think it's a particularly inspired or original story necessarily, but I think it's one of the better retellings of that story, particularly in modern cinema. And it's definitely an experience, and no one could stage the things in these two films the way that James Cameron can and does. And there have obviously been big grandiose films in the past, like the Lord of the Rings films, or Steven Spielberg has often worked on a big scale, particularly with war movies, that kind of thing. And it's different, but those directors have their style, and James Cameron has his, and it's like it's just very big, but it's also never overwhelming, because it's always it comes from a state of wonder. And in this, in The Way of Water in particular, it's a lot of it is told from the perspective of the children, so we've coming into the first movie. Jake Sully is our analog, and he's the human fish out of water who's been dropped into this amazing place. And now in this film, we have the children who grew up here, but they're very young and they haven't seen the world yet. And yet again, they're experiencing a lot of these things for the first time, particularly with the reef people and with the ocean. And it's I can't gush about the visuals in this movie enough. And they're really. It's just something that has to be experienced. I can't describe it. I've always been a sucker for anything that takes place underwater. I'm a big fan of The Abyss. Every time James Cameron makes a movie, it's for the ages. And it's maybe that's a big, that's the big reason I enjoy Titanic so much, even now. And I'm a big fan of The Abyss, which is a film that takes place, about 80% of it takes place underwater. It's a late 80s movie. And then there's Aliens and Terminator 2. And Terminator 2, it's probably the best sequel ever made.
Yeah, totally. Amazing. That might be his best film.
No, yeah, Terminator 2 is his masterpiece. No doubt. But
that one holds up the best, and it's got the best blend of practical and computer effects, really well integrated. That one's just that one actually kind of alone among films as the script went through more drafts. Or something.
You're probably right. And he's there are other writers credited with The Way of Water. I think it was Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver. Yeah, so there's a big handful of story by writers, and then screenplay James Cameron, Rick Jaffa, Amanda Silver. And Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver are probably better at writing dialogue than James Cameron. But there's definitely some other material here, story-wise, that probably didn't come from him. I guess the things that work the best, in my opinion, and honestly the most surprising, is this is a family movie, really. The main characters here are the children. Jake and Neytiri are definitely there, and they play major roles, but we spend the most time with their children, and particularly their younger son and this adopted daughter they have that we'll talk about a little more in the spoilers, because it's kind of a weird thing. But it's if it wasn't just tremendously violent, and 3 hours long, I would say this is a family film. It's about the middle son who's always getting in trouble and can never do anything right. And that's the main character of Avatar, The Way of Water. And he's just, he no matter how hard he tries, he just always screws it up, and everybody knows it. And we've all been there. I'm the middle son. That's how life was.
All right.
But
no, I'm just I pretty much agree with everything that's so far. And maybe one thing that I've had this conversation, or a conversation, with people for the last 12 years. I really liked the first Avatar. I saw it. I think
I do too.
See it opening. I didn't see it opening weekend. It was next week. I saw it right when it opened. And then I haven't seen it. And the closest I came was I watched playing a little bit on ABC the other night, and I turned it on. I probably watched like 50, you know,
Like 15 minutes.
minutes. It was near the end. Like things were blowing up, happening.
Excellent.
And you know what? It like, that's obviously not the ideal way to watch any bit of that movie, but it was, striking. Even just like pulling that one little chunk kind of in isolation, just seeing that as kind of like the thing that sort of, that was the full extent of my refresher.
Right.
And yeah, I kind of, I just immediately kind of flash back to take I had on Avatar in 2009 and kind of the take I have about this film. Like, if you're getting too hung up on his dialogue not being great and being like cobbled together from lots of other things that he's found, I mean, I just don't think that's the point,
I agree with you, and it's it's not the point or the intention. It's despite it being so simple, like it still works. But I think like maybe the goal is that it doesn't like distract. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's he's trying to kind of do like an archetypal kind of thing, and this is been his MO for forever. I mean, the other one of the other films I rewatched to pregame was Alien. I hadn't seen. I don't know. So I basically was watching it time, and it's the same thing kind of there. I mean, I
would watch. I watch Aliens like once a year. Like I love that and the Terminator films so much. At least the early Terminator films.
No, I mean those are definitely, if you're ranking the James Cameron, they get top 3 slots basically.
Right.
Even there, it's kind of like, I mean, he's using archetypes. The dialogue is often, it's not like quite so exposition heavy as like Christopher Nolan's dialogue, for example, where he just kind of like will just like, seemingly the characters
info dump constantly.
Exactly.
I mean, and to be fair, like the first 20 minutes of both Avatar movies is a lot of, hey, this is where we are. This is what's happened up until now. But then they kind of move on from that very quickly. Like it's a lot of information up front. But like, I don't know. You mentioned Christopher Nolan. I could not get through. Well, I take it back. Like I've watched Tenet, but like there's so much expository dialogue. And it's just super pretentious, and it's just like it's a lot of words all the time.
Yeah, well, he'll try, and he'll that he knows it because it's like he tries to mask it with having the actor like read the lines really fast and with a lot of intensity, often while they're walking somewhere, and then he'll have Hans Zimmer just like so it's like like he's really trying hard to like make this. And Cameron has that problem too a little bit. They're very much kind of like they're similar filmmakers in any way. That's one of them. But like when it works, I mean, it's in Aliens. That's a great example of like he movie to kind of like a series of set pieces, and with that in mind, I mean, that's kind of all you really need. Going back to what you were kind of saying earlier about plot kind of getting you from A to B. I mean, he's very much kind of like in the movie around really kind of huge set piece sort of moments, or just kind of building it around like, hey, here's this world. We're going to live in this world for 3 hours, and that's what he's thinking about when he's down and writing these stories. I mean, another film I watched. I'm going to keep answering that question.
Hold on, Dan.
Yeah, I rewatched the Brian.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dan. Go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no! We got to have good audio.
Yeah, and
But no,
I've
I
been.
watched the.
Go ahead.
I was just saying I was watching the Brian De Palma document thing. You're into movies. Go watch this documentary of Brian De Palma talks about all of his movies and the lessons in them. But the reason I bring this up is because he, in the films that he wrote, just explicitly kind of talks about how he sits down, he's kind of imagining the movie in his head, and he's building it around these images and these sequences, and then once he's gotten like three or four of these like big sequences, then it's just like, okay, what characters am I going to like pull through these? And people will sometimes kind of point to that and being like, oh, well, the characters, like, this is bad writing. And with Cameron and De Palma and directors who work this way, it's kind of like, well, I mean, by what yardstick? Because if you're talking about like writing that sets up and is kind of designed to support these really amazing sequences where the camera is going to be doing interesting things, and or these visuals are really going to be captivating, then like, I mean, isn't that what isn't that what movies are for? Like, I don't
Yes,
know. I mean, I don't know. That's always what I think about when I think about Avatar. Where I'm like, yeah, I mean, Titanic as well. I mean, I'm just like, yeah, I know that these movies are dumb, for lack of a better word. I mean, they're just, if I was just to read the screenplay, I would be like, I don't understand what people see in this. But it's not a novel, it's not a play. It's a visual experience, and
yeah.
so it's like, cool.
I mean, and that's you
Does it
just
like kind
said.
of set these sequences up? Yes.
And I mean, you just said it yourself. Like there, movies like Avatar are the reason that movies exist, because they can show you something that you can't see anywhere else, and you can certainly elevate it beyond that, and there are certainly times where that approach doesn't work, but it's you can't. The world of Pandora wouldn't work as well if it were in a novel. I don't think. That is why. That's why this is a movie and not a science fiction novel. So it's
Right.
the you know
Yeah,
the
like if you
the
wrote it out, I mean,
go,
nothing is really original enough for it to really kind of work. Just reduced to the ideas. Like, all of the
exactly.
things in here are kind of, you've seen other versions of virtually everything in this. If you're just kind of thinking about it from like, okay, yeah, an underwater society, the forest aliens. I mean, all this stuff is like not really that, which is why people like to knock the first Avatar, and probably will knock this one too. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's not, but like, you know, you know, neither Star Wars isn't very original either, and people love that movie, So it's like, who cares, The execution is original. That's the thing. Is as you're saying, it's like you really there is not another medium or even another film in this medium that is showing you things quite like you're going to see them in this film. And seeing it in a theater with the 3D glasses, I mean, that's kind of a, I don't know, it felt like it was a different of film going experience than you often get from like watching even like a Hollywood kind of movie. It was
Oh
very
yeah.
like it's not slow cinema by any means, but in some ways it kind of reminded me the experience of watching, I don't know, I watched the Bellatar film Satan Tango right when I was leaving Rochester. It's like the 7.5 hour like art film, black and white, like long shots of like people just kind of walking down these desolate country roads, presumably thinking about their lives. And yeah, there's not really a story there either. It's very much a film about putting you in this place and time for, the duration of the film. And there's a lot of ways that Avatar is kind of doing that too, especially in the middle. Like the middle section is really kind of where like narrative almost falls away for a little while, and you're just kind of, asked to sort of float in the water with these people, and
You're
just kind of exist in the same space as them.
you're absolutely right, and I think that is a good point to move on to spoilers. I'll say that it's we both like the movie. I definitely don't think it's perfect, but I also I don't know of another. There's no other director that could pull this off, And let's like the first movie. Technology was invented to make this possible. The James Cameron has been filming underwater for decades in ways that other directors won't even attempt. Now he's done underwater motion capture, and 40% of this movie or something is digital performance capture underwater. And it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's
Go
one
ahead.
of the things. I mean, you get the sense. I mean, this is where I'm going to get kind of like sentimental, and I'm going to, probably use some cliches, but like, yeah, I mean, I don't know, like James Cameron is very much like he's a Hollywood guy. He's working in the blockbuster tradition. He always has. Like, dude cannot imagine making a movie for anything less than like $1 billion. It seems. It's like there's a lot of ways where like James Cameron is like just the face of the machine. Just like this big profitable like blockbuster maker. But I don't know. It's like there's some maybe just like as he has kind of gotten so successful in that mode that he can kind of like do whatever he wants to a degree. I don't know. I mean, maybe this is like the romantic like film nerd in me, but like compared to some of the other like blockbuster kind of action films on this scope and budget level that you and I have seen over the last 10 years, they're not usually as quirky, like there's like you really are spending a lot of time with like James Cameron's obsessions, and you can totally tell if you didn't know already that yeah, this is a guy who really likes shipwrecks and sinking ships and underwater stuff, and he likes it, like
he's made a
diving
number
down
of
into the water.
documentaries that are largely about undersea exploration. Like there are huge swaths of James Cameron's career where he's not releasing movies, and it's not because he's not busy.
The Abyss, bro.
Yeah, Goes to the Abyss, and we just watched
Abyss in IMAX. Amazing.
At work we're
his best film.
We're changing the ceiling lights in my auditorium, and it's awful. And we have movies playing on the big screen. And the other day we watched Deep Sea Challenge, the recent documentary he did since the first Avatar film, where he goes to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. This is like he's crazy. No,
that's
yeah.
Cool.
I definitely recommend.
Like, I don't know. I mean,
go ahead.
I was going to say, you kind of want that. Like, you want, I don't know. I mean, another film I watched recently, while, kind of riding the Avatar train was one A Space Odyssey.
Nice.
Which, maybe the greatest movie ever made. I'll throw that out there for people to, react to. But, there's some Kubrick qualities in James Cameron where he's like, Kubrick did the same thing. He like had people make cameras so that he could film, scenes by candlelight, and it's like literally kind of, seeing the artistic process kind of, of technology improving and vice versa. And I don't know. I don't think Cameron, I mean, few people are as good as Kubrick, so I'm not going to set them into comparison with each other. But like, I like how Cameron has kind of kept alive this old Hollywood tradition of like, once you've achieved all of your money and your success, and like people are just going to give you things because you're as he said, king of the world. You can kind of go a little weird and quirky and crazy, and you can like put in a bunch of stuff that probably like you could argue doesn't need to be there, like you could cut it, or it's kind of silly, you could rewrite it. But you know what, he's at that point, and so it's, I don't know, like, even though it's like the most expensive movie ever made, it's a huge blockbuster. It very much kind of feels like a quirky sort of passion project that, that he's been working on for a while.
It,
And
it absolutely is.
I like that
That's,
because I just don't see it anymore very much,
if
especially in that genre.
some, the director comes back around to make his passion project, and it is not something like Avatar, and not to say that other directors haven't done something similar, Steven Spielberg has been talking about making a musical or remaking West Side Story for decades, and then he finally did it. And you know what? It's pretty good, but it's made under a reasonable budget. He didn't invent any technology in order to achieve it, and I'm not trying to disrespect it at all because it's a fantastic film. But that's even other similar directors who
Spielberg wants to make 12 more movies before he dies. James Cameron,
James Cameron hasn't made 12 movies and might not get there before he retires. But
yeah, I mean, no, he's beating, if we're going to compare him to Kubrick, he has exceeded Stanley's old record of like 12 years between movies. He's like making that his small like thing.
Like, it was 12 years between Titanic and Avatar, and it's been 13 years since.
To do it, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit the spoiler thing. There's definitely some specifics I'd like to touch on while I've got you here, but it's we've been talking about how, like, ultimately this is a very Dan, are you still with me? You're frozen. Stand by, guys.
I like the it's a cliche to say it, but I like the personal touch, I guess, is my point. Because you just don't get it I feel like I don't get that in the Marvel movies that I've seen. It doesn't feel very, there's not, whenever they try to get too quirky, they fire those directors and find less quirky people.
Yeah, people that are going to listen to them, and James Cameron has a history of not doing what the executives tell him to do.
Yeah, right. No, and he's at least the way he describes it, it's very they're always very cantankerous conversations where he just is like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Did we forget who made Titanic? It was me, not you.
I paid for this building." Like, yeah. Good times. Yeah, good right, I mean, he's you can't say he doesn't have an ego, but
yeah, very much so.
So the conceit here, with Avatar: The Way of Water, is that Jake has been living as a Na'vi, as one of the natives, for 15 years, and the humans come back. But Jake has raised a family, and he has 2 sons and a daughter of his own, and they've adopted a daughter. These are all Na'vi, obviously. They've adopted a daughter that is the biological daughter of Dr. Grace Augustine's Avatar, Sigourney Weaver's character from the first movie, and it's played again by Sigourney Weaver, which is very cool and kind of weird. And then they also have there are humans who stuck around, and there's a human named Spider that kind of hangs out with them, even though he's not Na'vi, he's not really part of the family, but he prefers to hang out with the Na'vi out in the wild than he does with the humans in the lab. And after some time, humans have come back and they very quickly reestablish a base. And then Jake, and what I thought was a very cool action beat early in the movie, there is kind of established that the Na'vi are raiding the humans' bases and like convoys for supplies. And there's a really cool thing where they crash a train, like pretty early in the movie.
Yeah. I remember that now.
But eventually it comes out that Colonel Quaritch, Stephen Lang's character, is back. They apparently all the Marines before the big climax fight in the first Avatar, they were required to download their consciousnesses into like computers so they could be backed up and planted into new bodies later on. Blah blah blah, sci-fi mumbo jumbo, and so Stephen Lang's character is brought back as a Na'vi character, which is pretty cool. And I'm just going to throw out that I think he's way better in this movie than he was in the first one, and he's no less scene chewy. You know, like his very everything he does is very ham-fisted, like very simple dialogue in the first movie, and he's playing the same character but with a lot more. There's a lot more to him this time. Anywho, so
well, James Cameron loves his villains are always like twirling their mustaches.
Yeah. In the first movie, he had like the big scar.
Like, well, this guy is like, I mean, Jimmy Boy outdid himself this time because few of like it used to be that like Billy Zane in Titanic was like the high watermark for like ridiculous, cartoon villains.
Paul Reiser, dude.
But now this guy.
Yeah.
He's pretty slimy too. He's absolutely the guy from Aliens is absolutely a mustache twirler. But the new champion is Stephen Lang in this film. Like, the first scene there, he's like, "Yep, you're not me, but you have my memories. And my memories really hate this guy.
Yeah.
So why don't you go kill him?" And that's all the motivation.
And that's all we need. No, yeah. And so it comes out that he's
all the motivation.
That he's back, and he kind of has this vendetta against Jake and Neytiri, obviously, because they ultimately, they caused this uprising that led to the downfall of the other human colony, and they killed him. So he finds out, oh shit, I'm dead, and I'm going to come find this guy. And that's like the first hour or so of the movie. And then Jake, it finds out that they're looking for him specifically. So he takes his family and runs off to the Reef people. And that's this movie, like, is very clearly like old school 3-act, big, blockbuster kind of structure. That's the first chunk is the humans get back and they find out that the humans are looking for them. That takes about an hour. There's a couple of action beats in there. And then they move on to meet the Reef people. And here's this like long center section of the movie you were talking about before, where like it's more just about learning how to exist with the Reef people again, and just experiencing the new wildlife and seeing what life is like for the aquatic Na'vi. And it's actually like, it's interesting. It's a different kind of race almost. They, instead they have like flippers on their arms and they have thicker tails. They're more adapted to living in water than the forest people. And the middle son, Loak, he creates this bond with a whale. And that's, but like, kind of like you were saying, it's about an hour of the movie and the plot really just kind of falls away. There's definitely some stuff like it's high school drama. The new kids getting bullied by the jocks, and he meets the cute girl who sticks up for him, and that kind of stuff. But the real momentum of the movie kind of slows, so you can take a very long breath, to be fair, and like absorb all these amazing visuals and these amazing sea creatures. And then the last third of the movie, the latter 70 minutes, is like just a nonstop like action scene on a scale that like we haven't really seen since the Lord of the Rings, except it's like, okay, imagine the flying battle in the first Avatar, except now everything's on the water. And it's that's when I just told you the whole movie in like 4 minutes. It's very simple, but it's got it where it counts, if you ask me. And you're not coming to this movie for like all the nuanced storytelling. You're coming for the amazing visuals and to see the cool sea creatures and to see all the humans get murdered violently by blue people and sea monsters. That's why you're here. And you get that in spades for 3 hours and 12 minutes.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. I mean, it's a movie in the grand tradition of like big, crazy, ridiculous. Like let's just like spend all the money, like build the biggest sets, just
But they don't
really
build
kind
any
of
sets.
big.
The sets are all virtual. Actually, you know what? It seemed like, and I could be wrong, but it really seemed like the boats that the human characters are using were filmed practically on actual water, and then like they would superimpose Stephen Lang's character digitally, like traditional digital effects as opposed to everything's animated. It seemed like that was the case to me, and maybe it just looks so good that that's not true, and the boats are all CGI also. But like it really seemed to me that the dinghies and stuff, maybe not the big ship, but like the little motorboats that the humans were riding around on were built physically and filmed practically, I think. And that, I don't know that for sure, but that's just my guess based on the visual of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're probably right. I mean, yeah, it's like one recurring thought that I had while watching the movie was like, just basically like, at what point can we just like, at what point do we just go ahead and say like this is an animated film?
I mean, and that,
like,
there's probably there's much less live action photography in this movie than there was in the first, right?
Almost like the exception when you see a live action element.
It's true. Yeah.
It's very like, I mean, it's all very like seamless. It very much like, the goal is to, and he's been doing this for 30 years, but like the goal is to have like the photographic and the computer generated elements be virtually indistinguishable from each other. And that's very much the case here, but like there's so much that is built kind of virtually that it just I was kind of like just wrestling with basic taxonomic kind of questions about like, okay, is this an animated film? Like this like theoretically win the Oscar for best film, and like probably not, but why not?
I would.
So anyway, very quickly,
I would argue that there's no reason animated films should not be eligible to win Best Picture. Not that we've never had one. We've never had one that's won before, but there have been a handful that have been nominated. So even if we decide that Avatar is animated, and so be it. It doesn't. I don't think that should mean it should be eligible for any fewer awards than it would be if that were not the case.
But that's what you're pointing out is really interesting because what you're highlighting is that animated film is not necessarily a descriptive category describing like what materials the movie is being made with, animated.
Right. I mean, and that is an important thing to note. I am a believer in performance capture, right? These characters are not keyframe animated. It is actors who are delivering a performance that is captured. The physical movements that they perform are captured in a 3D space by the computer and applied to a character that exists in the computer. It's not an animator that's doing this, and and there may be a touch up here or there, but it's not the same as an animated film. Like it's not Toy Story, where every movement the character does comes from an animator, and the only thing the actor provides is the voice. It's
yeah, right.
And I'm a believer in the process, and it's more akin, in my opinion, and I think I've heard James Cameron say something similar. Like it's not eliminating working with actors. He's working with actors, but it's eliminating like the time in the makeup chair. It's more akin to putting makeup or like a fantastical prosthetic on an actor than it is to add like traditional animation.
Right.
And I fully believe in that process. And it's I don't think Hollywood has totally come around to the idea of it yet, because the people that decide what gets nominated are old and stuffy and pretentious. But it's I just want to be clear that like it's a very different process than traditional keyframe animation, because it's a very like actor centric capture process, just like filming with traditional cameras.
Yeah, right. No, totally. But what's what we're getting at here is that it's this distinction between animated and live action. I mean, one, is it really about what is happening in the film, or is it just as much about like value judgments that get attached to animation as like a children's medium versus live action as like serious adult cinema?
Animation is not a children's medium. Animation is a method with which you make films. Anyone who thinks animation's a children's medium should watch Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. That I was trying to find some time to review it on the show.
Yeah, right.
That may or may not happen, but it's on Netflix and it's fantastic, and it is not for children. And that's not even
right.
it's not. There's no sex. It's not terrifically violent. It's just thematically very mature, and it's absolutely beautiful, and it's a complicated, nuanced story that children. I'm sure if I was 6 years old, like I would have thought it was cool. I loved. I've always been a big lover of Nightmare Before Christmas, and it's like, oh look, I love stop motion animation. I'll watch this, and I probably would have liked it, but I would not have understood it. It is it's as complex as any other of Guillermo del Toro's films, and it's stop motion animation. Animation is not, as you said, a children's medium, and certainly there are, as I was saying, like with actors' performances, it's very different than animation. There's a lot of wildlife in these films, and that's obviously where the conversation becomes more cloudy, in my opinion. I don't think that the Na'vi performances in this movie are animated. They are digitally captured performances delivered by actors, as I said before. But there's also, there's whales there, and all these amazing fish creatures. And no, there's no analog for those in the real world that you could, film. Like you could use it as reference, but whales in the real world don't have 17 fins or whatever. So they can use those live action animals as behavior references, but those parts of the film are animated. And again, is Avatar a family film? Maybe, maybe not. There's a lot of family-centric themes in it. It's also terrifically violent as far as PG-13 movies go. It's not bloody, but there's a lot of death. There's notable moments of dismemberment, etc.
Yeah. Well, let me back up a minute and
please
approach this point from a different angle, because what was really, really fun to me about being a grad student and doing a PhD in film studies, and then being a teacher of film studies for a little while was, reading a lot of film theory, from throughout the 120-ish years film's been around, and seeing people kind of cycling back over and over again to some really, really basic questions about, to quote the title of Andre Bazin's famous book, "What is cinema?" And one of the things that people talk about over and over again, throughout the history of like people writing about movies, is just like, what are the basic like raw materials of film? And for a lot of years, like for most of the medium's history, like the default assumption was real stuff out in the world is the raw material of cinema. There's a whole like school of film theory built around, just like valorizing the idea of like going out and finding some cool locations, some like really scraggly looking dudes, and like trusting that the camera will pick up on natural beauty. That has kind of all gotten blown up with digital stuff, and now there's been a bunch of conversations about like, well, was that ever true? Or there have always been movies like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari where sets are being painted on behind the actors. And, haven't some animated films, hasn't rotoscoping kind of been like dissolving some of these boundaries between like what's really there, on in the world and what's being kind of created by an artist. And what was exciting about the first Avatar and this one too was it's kind of like a 3-hour invitation to like think about these like really foundational questions about what is cinema, like what is the material of cinema, like because as you're saying, I mean it's really really kind of with something this complex where there are actors being motion captured and then computer people kind of come in and sort of do the makeup and all that stuff. Then like there's also a whole other crew of people who are building like these completely fantastic worlds in computers, and maybe they're using like real whales as references, or maybe they're having to kind of just invent all this stuff themselves, because it doesn't exist in the real world. But when you're watching the movie, you're like, my God, there's like all of these elements. Some of it's actually there, some of it's not. And it's so like thoroughly integrated that some of these questions about like pulling apart, I don't know. Now I'm kind of trailing off here, but like that's not something I get from a lot of films of this like level. Like there's a lot of movies that use CGI and use it very extensively and use it very well, but maybe because a lot of movie people just aren't as crazy and as obsessive as James Cameron, like to back to what we were saying earlier, like there's just like a level of obsession and thoroughness here that just like it's all just so much farther beyond other things that you've seen. So it was hard for me not to kind of just really hard theory thoughts about like, is this still film? Like, is this still film as it was traditionally imagined, 100 years ago? Like, well, yeah, kinda, in some way, like that's an exciting, thing to do during a movie, I don't know how we got on the. I've lost my own point, but that's just a lot of theory thoughts kind of can happen in a screening of this movie.
The well, it's a film. I can answer that for you. This is a film.
Yeah, but what is a film? Like
Yeah,
that's
what is a
the other
film?
question.
It was not shot on. It was not recorded on film. That's
Right?
not
Yeah,
not a
see?
thing anymore. No, yeah, it's just. I mean, and we
Cameron
can
killed
and we can drivel on about technology and stuff all we want. But um, there is some. There's a thematic thing here having to do with a specific character that I do want to talk about, and then we'll probably do some closing. I want to mention Kiri, who is the teenage character played by Sigourney Weaver. Like we said earlier, the character is Jake and Neytiri adopted her. It's a character that was born of Dr. Grace Augustine's avatar, her Na'vi body, kind of inexplicably. They don't know who the father is, but as we go through the movie, we notice some interesting things about Kiri. First of all, like I noticed before anything got super weird, that she seems to be able to stay underwater much longer than other Na'vi. Even she can, even like the reef people. The most of our characters, our main cast, Jake's family, grew up in the forest, and they know they have to hold their breath underwater, but they're not, they haven't grown up underwater. They're not used to staying under there for a long period of time. And of course, there's a big exciting thriller beat midway through the movie that has to do with, oh God, this thing's coming after me, but I can't hold my breath any longer. But even the reef people, they have a limit to how long they can stay underwater, and they have methods to get past that or whatever. But Kiri, she just seems to hang out like for unspecific, very long lengths of time. And then later on, she, the fauna on Pandora, they have this this thing that comes out of the back of their head, and the Na'vi can connect to other wildlife and stuff. And she does that too, but she seems to have some sort of control over wildlife that other Na'vi do not. But we find out she's also epileptic. She's prone to having epileptic seizures and passing out, and she has a really bad episode underwater, and she almost doesn't make it through. But then at the end of the movie, she kind of comes through and saves the day, and it's like a weird. I guess what I'm talking about is like, is there some analogy here, or am I thinking about it too much? Like, it's obviously something spiritual, but like I wouldn't think that James Cameron would make a statement about like a Christ type figure, but I would say that in the characters in the movie don't know who her father is. And it's kind of implied right. It might be the child of Awa, and Awa is that's what the Na'vi call their god, their deity. Basically, it's the spirit of nature, and it's the thing, the energy force that connects all things in nature. So is this like a Jesus Christ, like virgin situation? Is it born of the midichlorian situation? Did you have any thoughts about this as the movie was happening? Like it stood out to me.
I'm glad I didn't know. This is not something I noticed, and now that you're talking about it, I'm thinking back, and I'm like, oh yeah, they do kind of say that they don't know who her dad is, and I don't think they ever resolve that.
They don't. Yeah, they don't resolve it, and they don't spend a lot of time talking about it. But there's enough of these little beats with Kiri that like something's going to happen in the next. I don't know if it's going to be one film or three at this point. It depends on how much money this makes. But there's more Avatar coming. And I'm just curious if you have any.
Film the third one already? Like, didn't he film two?
Yes, two and three are filmed back to back, and the live photography of Avatar 4 is completed. They haven't done the motion capture stuff. So like there's a small chunk of Avatar 4 that's even in the can already. And it's because they don't want the younger human characters to age out and stuff. So it's
okay.
But no, Avatar 3 is in the can, and that one is coming out. But, depending on how this one does, they might change the ending of Avatar 3 and wrap it up there, or we might get 5 of these. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, right. I'm skeptical. I mean, I was skeptical that this one would ever come out. It sounded like, James Cameron was just off in crazy land, and he was like, I'm going to make 5 of these in 2009. So I'm amazed this one came out. But like it definitely like a lot of bits of like there's a lot of things in the script where you can just kind of sense that like, oh yeah, like
there's more to explore here. And that's not to say that it's not like blatant foreshadowing, or like it's not wasting screen time telling you about things that you're not going to see for years. And it's also, this movie has a clear ending. There's a story that it wants to tell, and it gets to the end of that story and it wraps up, so it is another chapter in ultimately an ongoing story, but it's not super like episodic or serialized in that way. It's just, just like the first Avatar film has it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if it never got a sequel, it would have been totally okay. And this movie is the same way. Like if we didn't know we were getting another movie, this could be it wraps itself up enough, and there are certainly some things left open that we could explore later, but there isn't, like, they're not banging you over the head with, there's more sequels coming.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's a little cliffhanger in the way that the Stephen Lang character,
Right.
you know, in classic James Cameron fashion. It's just like, oh, can't let this bad guy die, even though he's a bad guy, and I know that he's a bad guy. So there's a little bit of that, but most of it's on the level of like, and you know, it's the world building stuff. Like you can tell that like the thing he cares about, like the movie cares about more than anything else, is like the world building, just like the moments where it can tell you about the culture and kind of show you like how they live and all that stuff. And a lot of the places where it felt like, oh, you know, there's more here is kind of like in the lore realm. You know, it felt
Oh yeah.
like oh yeah, like there's definitely like James Cameron definitely had like a big binder full of details, you know, and we're gonna get more of them, you know, and I like that. It's like it kind of, you know, it's a, you know, some of the immersive quality of the film. I mean, obviously, some of it comes from like the 3D and the IMAX and all that, but like some of the immersive quality of the film is just related to the sense that there's like a world beyond the frame, you know, that you're not seeing. And some of these unanswered questions just sort of contribute to that. Some of these things that aren't fully explained about like why certain characters can do whatever. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I have about the you know, but yeah, like that the stuff with Kiri seems like it could be set up some more like, you know, ways to work in, you know, the weird spiritual, religious, you know, some mystical stuff, you know, into this world.
Save
You
the
know, it
trees,
seems like
save the
that
whales.
the third one's got to do, you know, got to have some kind of like new hook to, you
There,
know,
I mean,
like the
James
water
Cameron does
one.
a lot of talking, and we've known since, or he mentioned years and years ago that like the second movie would have to do with the oceans of Pandora. He's also mentioned that he wants to explore other. It's is it polyphemus? I don't know. I did some reading on Wikipedia, but Pandora is actually a moon of a much larger planet, and that's
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
they get the eclipse and stuff, because when their planet passes behind, and that's where their nights come from. But like there are other moons, so we may go to some other moon at some point. He's been talking recently that like the fourth or fifth movie might show us what Earth actually looks like.
Damn.
And so, but James Cameron talks a lot, and at this point, we don't know if we're ever going to see any of those other movies. So it's,
I hope we do. I hope we get to.
me too. You're absolutely right. Like there is so much here that we're like, probably even if we get 5 movies, like there's so much written that we're never going to see. And it's like you put it really eloquently in like the world beyond the frame, like there's so much richness to this like world and this wildlife that they've created, and it's just like it makes it seem like it's a place we could really go.
Oh yeah,
like if
totally.
in a way that other movies try and fail, and it's, or like try so hard to reach and just never get to that immersive quality that these Avatar movies have achieved. And that's probably the thing that will make them continue, because you can't, I don't know, like 3D home viewing has kind of like gone by the wayside. We still periodically get movies in 3D. Very few of them are captured in 3D the way Avatar is. So I think that's relevant. But I saw an IMAX 2D showing, so it was big, but it wasn't 3D or high frame rate. Was it variable? It might have been variable frame rate, and that his weird camera tools that we should probably make more use of, and nobody does after the Hobbit movies were received so weirdly. But
yeah, the Hobbit movies.
I like one of those Hobbit movies, and there's
the first one.
I like the first one, and then there's some other. There's a lot of good stuff in the second one. Like everything with the dragon is amazing. Other than that, they're very weird and not very good. Anyway,
the Rankin Bass animated Hobbit is like that was my gateway into Lord of the Rings fandom. So that was always going to be the bar.
That's fair. Anyway, I think that's good. Like we both like the movie, and I can't gush about the visuals anymore. Like but I can't stop. So I might as well just call it. There's so much to be said about Pandora and all of these amazing creatures that we're introduced to here, but it doesn't really do any of it justice. And frankly, if you liked the first Avatar, you'll probably like this one. If you didn't like the first Avatar, you may or may not. Like, I've actually heard some people, they were like, yeah, that first movie was just like boring, the blue Pocahontas or whatever. And then I've actually, had some friends see this and say they like it much better. I've also seen a lot of people saying, I didn't like the first one. This is exactly the same. I don't care. So it is what it is. So, but I recommend for sure that people go see it for themselves and make up their own mind. But at this point, any closing thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. It's like, if you didn't like the first film, I don't think anything in here is really going to change that. But I would recommend Avatar to, basically anyone who liked the first film, you'll like it. Other people I'd recommend it to, like, I would actually, I would push my some of my academic, like, film scholar friends. I would be like, no, you should see this, because this is like kind of existing so far on out there on the cutting edge of like what film technology can do, that you are going to be thinking about, some of these really foundational kind of like film, like, what is film? Like, you will be kind of grappling with that, and that's really cool. The other people I'd recommend it to is just like, if you want to see something that's, really stupid ambitious, and, really is just kind of maybe like kind of full of itself in believing that it alone can show you something you haven't seen before. I mean, if you're at all kind of drawn to like these big extravagant, like, like these big extravagant, like, crazy visionary kinds of like experiments that, occasionally like will get popped out of the Hollywood machine every now and then, like, it's much in that tradition, and, you'll have a good time on that level. So so
I
yeah, great stuff. I really enjoyed it. If I get another chance, I might go back and see it again, because it's like, this is like, again, what is cinema? Like, well, it's partly the cinematic experience, and so,
There's
take advantage
so
of
much
the moment.
coming out right now that I want to see. I had a chance to see The Whale yesterday. I really like that. There's some more stuff coming out after Christmas, but yeah, like, I definitely want to try to find a time to check this out in theaters once more. And I'll definitely, I'll be first in line at Target when it hits Blu-ray. But also, why is there? They did a 4K remaster of the first Avatar. With, it's just high resolution and HDR and the whole works, and you can't stream it anywhere. It's not available on disc. What gives? Like, and it's probably going to be in a very expensive 2-pack in the spring. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, probably. But anyway,
We've got the angles all worked out that way.
absolutely. And as always, thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to hear more, don't forget to like and subscribe. My name is Brandon. I'm Engine25 on all the things, sometimes with an underscore. You can find us on YouTube and podcast services by searching Engine25 Reviews, no space in Engine25. We'll be back soon with a new review. And until then, go watch a movie.